unsettling hospital. I never thought that I would find myself in a hospital in the middle of the night, but that's exactly where I ended up. My stomach was churning with fear as I lay on the uncomfortable bed, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the machines and the soft sounds of the nurses outside my room. I was admitted to the hospital for a routine procedure, an operation for a minor problem I had with my stomach. The hospital was a little out of town. I had not heard of it before, but I needed a hospital urgently, so a friend of mine suggested it to me to do this certain procedure. I felt something off from the moment I arrived. The hospital was old and decrepit, with peeling paint and flickering lights. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptics and blood, making me feel nauseous and uneasy. The staff were equally unsettling. They moved around the hospital in silence, their faces expressionless and their eyes hollow, as if they were so focused on something that they didn't give any importance to the patients. Every time I tried to engage them in conversation, they would give me short, dismissive answers before hurrying away. I asked for some water, and when they brought it to me, they didn't say a word. The nurse gave me the water with a sharp push of the glass, as if to say, "Here, take it." As the night wore on, I began to feel increasingly isolated and alone. There was a strange silence, as if I was the only patient in the whole hospital. The darkness outside seemed to be settling in for the night, and I could hear strange noises coming from the walls and ceiling. I tried to reassure myself that it was just my imagination, telling myself, "Calm down, Beki. It's the anxiety about the surgery." But I still could feel that something was off. Suddenly, the door to my room creaked open. I tensed up, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for someone to enter. But no one came. The door just hung there, swaying gently in the breeze. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the open doorway and listening to the eerie silence. Finally, I summoned the courage to get out of bed and investigate. I was still in a lot of pain, even with all the drugs they had given me. As I crept towards the door, I could feel my palms sweating and my breath coming in short gasps. When I reached the doorway, I peered out into the hallway. It was empty, but I could hear faint footsteps coming from down the corridor. I followed the sound, my heart racing as I turned the corner and found myself face to face with a figure in a white lab coat. For a moment, I froze, unable to move or speak, but then I tried to convince myself he was maybe one of the doctors and was there to help me. He just stood there, though, staring at me with blank eyes. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. Something about him seemed off. He didn't reply to me when I spoke to him. As I looked over his shoulder, I realized he was not alone. Dozens of others in identical lab coats were emerging from a room. Their faces so strange. They seemed to be communicating without speaking, their movements synchronized and calculated. I tried to back away, but they closed in around me, blocking my path. I was trapped, surrounded by these strange figures. And then they started to speak, in a language that I couldn't understand. I screamed, but no one came to help me. The hospital was silent, as if everyone had disappeared. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and when I turned around, the man in the white coat was inches away from my face. He spoke to me, in a voice that seemed to come from within my own mind. It told me that I was not like the others, that I was special, and that it had been waiting for me for a long time. I tried to fight back, but he was too strong. He dragged me down a dark hallway to a room that was hidden down from the rest of the hospital. Inside, there was a strange machine with wires, tubes, and flashing lights. The figure pushed me into the machine, and suddenly, everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses. They told me that I had been in a coma for weeks, that my body had been racked with fever and infection. My heart was racing, body shaking. I looked around the room, and everything seemed normal. The same white walls, the same machines beeping, and the same sterile smell. Then I remembered the face of one of the doctors, the one who had been there when I woke up. I had seen him before, in my dream, or whatever it was. He had been one of the figures in the lab coat, one of the ones who had spoken to me in that strange language. My hand started to tremble. Was it possible that it wasn't just a dream? That something had happened to me while I was in a coma? I couldn't discern what was real or not. I started to believe that those strange figures in lab coats were not just a product of my imagination. They had transferred me to another room for some reason that only they knew. And I am sure that they drugged me for weeks to hide the truth. I checked myself out of the hospital in the days following. I now lived in constant fear of the hospital, of the strange figures that roamed its halls, and of the secrets that lay hidden within its walls.